So look, this may give the whole thing away, but he actually asked Abby, he says, well, what had happened? He says, come on, what's this all about? I queried. Here he is, Bill is in the kitchen, in his kitchen, at the kitchen table in Brooklyn, and this guy comes in and he says, I got religion, okay? So here he's telling him the secret, he's giving it away. So in our program here, we have, the steps tell us what this higher consciousness, this spiritual experience is all about. And what it really comes down to is getting away, because the topic was, I want to build my self-confidence. But like everything else, common sense becomes uncommon sense, right? Common sense in our mind tells us, look, if we work at it and if we do it, we'll get better at it. But that doesn't happen, because the more we work at it, the more we try to control our addictions, the more we try to control the food, guess what we're blocking out? The sunlight of spirit. Because what happens, that's where we get into the defects of character, the envy, the lust, the gluttony, right? The jealousy, all of these things, and pride, the sensual pride. So here, self-esteem. How do I build my self-esteem? Well, if we do it the conventional way, people tell us to say this, do this. Some people say, talk about your experiences, and no, we can't do it that way, because the needed power is not there. Page 45, it says, we lack the power. We need a power greater than ourselves. Ourselves are so limited. It's so limited. It's like it just doesn't work. I always use that example of the centipede. It has 1,000 legs or 100 legs, and it was racing another insect, and they were having the race, and the other insect thought, I know how I could get this centipede to lose the race. He said to the centipede, look, tell me, I know you have all of these legs, let me know how you control it and how you do it, and when you take each step. So then, but he says, I know I'm going to lose, but this is what I want you to do. So after the race, you could tell me how you manipulated and how you did everything so I could know. So what happened was, they started the race and the centipede went like this. It couldn't move. That's the way we run our lives, right? When we use our self-will and we try to intellectualize, should I say this to that person? What if they look at me the wrong way? They don't like me? So here, we have a man. In the very beginning, Bill, when he goes in, Dr. Silkworth realized a new man. And when in his little kitchen table in Brooklyn, when Bill had Ebby come in, who was a down-and-out Bowery drunk, he didn't even recognize him. And he says, he does give it away right away. He says, I got religion. So it goes on to say, on page 11, he reinforces it. He says, but my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. So in our steps in our program, we talk about a higher power, a higher consciousness. Our human will, the diets, 95% of the time it fails. The other 5% who struggle, they're miserable. But we do have a solution. Believe it or not, that's why in Overeaters Anonymous it says we are powerless over food. Alcoholics Anonymous say alcohol. And I was at a meeting once and some guy got up and you know what he said? He said it's everything. He said we're powerless over everything in our lives. So the powerlessness comes from understanding and trying to do it. And it says on page 45, it says 45, and we agnostics, lack of power, that was our problem. So we don't have the power. So he goes on to say his human will had failed. And he goes on to say on page 12, so he's telling him, so here we have, look, this program, it is such a simple program, and we have the solution. We don't need to go to 1,000 meetings. We don't go to have to sponsor 1,000 people. We don't have to call up 100 people about our problem. Just to give you an example, I had somebody call me the other day and they had a problem with somebody and they went on and on about this particular person. She met them and she realized they weren't listening to her, and she thought I could help her because she heard one of the meetings and she's telling me the problem. So where's the answer to the problem? She was trying to figure out, like if I was at a business meeting, if I had to tell people what to do or figure things out, or if people got me upset, the solution wasn't, she just missing the whole point. The whole point, the problem is within us, okay? When you change your perception and thinking, I have another quote here, when you get out of the self, the whole world surrenders. So in another person I was speaking to, they said, look, what they're doing is they're sitting down, she's sitting down with her daughter, and what they're going to do is figure out that how to treat each other and what to do and how to figure this whole thing out. So when you sit down with somebody, you're going to tell them and have a discussion with them. What you're going to be telling them is how they should change so you be happy, right? But we have this expression, change me, bless them. Again, the answer to all of these problems with our relationships, with our addictions, with everything in our life is the perception change. So Ebby got this, Bill got this perception change. Some of you here have had that spiritual awakening. The spiritual awakening we could have right now. We don't have to wait with that. When we understand it's not about us, when we get out of the self. I said the whole topic again is how do I build my self-esteem? No, we want to lose the self-esteem because the quote is this, that when I humble myself, here's a quote I have, I acknowledge my nothingness. So when we get down and we get rid of the self, then we lose the sins, right? All the defects of character, step 4, go away. They fall away. They're cast out. God takes it. Our higher consciousness, we get in that 4th dimension. Because what is jealousy from, right? What is envy from? What is pride from? From the self. The whole idea of religions and programs, these philosophies, but we're lucky because we have an instruction book here. We have the instruction book. Again, if you got a table and you had to put it together, without the instruction book, you could probably do it, right? You'd probably have, I used to say when I used to work on cars, and if someone said, how did it go when you worked on a car? I said, it really went well. I even had a few parts left over. So, that's the way we operate. We miss all these parts. So again, if you want to have all the parts together and not have any screws, they said you lost your screws, you're losing your screws, here's a screw and pick it up. We don't have to lose the screws in our brain. We get it together when we're out of the self. Again, God created us with this fear, flight or flight response if we're in the wilderness or when someone puts a gun to our head, but we misuse it for every little thing. And that's why we feel if we don't have self-esteem, the ego's saying, I'm not going to be happy unless when I walk into me, everybody's going to like me, everybody in the room. But you know what the amazing thing is? And this is the whole thing here. The topic is how do I build my self-esteem? Ebby got it. Bill got it. So where does it come from? It comes from getting out of the self. Can you imagine? And I said, when you think you're nothing, all things come to you. It opens up the awareness of the whole world. Again, you walk out of the house, or you're driving your car and you're thinking about resentment or anger, or you're thinking about your little plans and designs. You're missing everything. You're missing the world. When you're with people, you're missing the vibrations of the love and the tolerance. Those are the things we have, the defects of character. And then we want to be love, tolerant, patience, humility, kindness. But it's all here already. We don't have, if we try to be kind, if we try to be, love people, it doesn't work. When we get out of the self, all these things are possible. All these things come to us with our addictions. We're into the self when we want that more morsel of food. It's all about the self. But you can't blame us. Look at the advertisements on TV, the internet, when you drive down the highway, all the pleasure they show and the bliss that you're going to get from the food. No, it's pleasure. It's pleasure. But we want the real joy and happiness and bliss. But then after, use the example of climbing Mount Everest, and I'll never tire of it because the guy spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. He maimed himself trying to climb up, almost killed himself for momentary pleasure, and he got on the top. But you know what? The worst part is that momentary pleasure, on the other side is a lot of pain. Because when he came back down and he thought about it and he went home, he says, I got to climb another mountain. Because if you have $1 million, you want $2 million. It just doesn't end. But anyway, let's get to the spiritual awakening here, so we can have it, here before I finish, so everybody can have a spiritual awakening, because it's going to tell us here how to do it. And he says on page 13, and it does say that phrase I was talking about. It says in the 3rd paragraph, common sense would become uncommon sense, right? What our common sense tells us, don't listen to it, right? Was to switch quietly when in doubt. That's step 11, prayer and meditation. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter a new relationship with my Creator, and I would have the elements. This is on page 13 in Bill's story. This is the most important phrase here. Way of living which answered all my problems. So if you have a problem today, if you're upset, you're depressed, which a lot of us are, I know. If you have this feeling, you can answer all your problems. It's all about the self-esteem, getting out of self, because page 62 says selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of our problems. Again, if you're depressed during the day, if you're upset, you're thinking of the self. This whole program is getting out of the self. What does step 1 said? We were powerless, right? Right away it's telling you, you got to be out of self. You can't figure it out. And step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So we have no power. Lack of power, that was our problem. Step 3 gives us the answer here. So we could, right now, step 3 made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God. So, step 3, we could read it. People in this program, by the way, the people I spoke to were in the program for over 30 years that I use those examples of, but yet they were still trying to figure it out. And they were miserable in their relationships, in all of these things. You know, most of our problem it talks about in steps 4 resentments in our relationship to people. But we could sit there and just smile because we're not coming from the ego, the self anymore. And that's the whole spiritual awakening is realizing that concept there. So he's saying he promised that he would change. Now on page 14 is the answer. Okay, page 14 on the first paragraph. The word I love here is simple. Page 14, first paragraph. I'm going to mute. Okay. Okay, page 14. Simple, but not easy. If I tell you this whole program and people doing this will realize how simple it is to have a spiritual awakening, to get out of the self, to resolve all your problems. You know, even death. What does death mean? You're thinking of the self. Now, people say, well, I should think of the self. You know, the self is me and the human experience. No, it's a lie, because your self is related to what people told you it had to be. We grew up in this materialistic society, so everybody, you know, we were taught that it all had to be about the self. But, and again, like I said, to find the self is to lose the self. So the thing is that it talks about here on page 15 where he says the most impossible. Here I talked about 2 examples of these people I spoke to in the program with over 30 years each who are having these problems. You know, either you're in the problem or the solution. So I let them go on for 10 minutes and tell me the problem. But, you know, the only solution, look, when a sponsor, somebody calls me like these people did, I might say something like, go to step 3. There's nothing else I could say because the problem is in here. By sitting down and telling the other person, by trying, you know, step on page 60, it talks about being the director of the play. It never works, right? Your whole lives, you understand that it's been miserable. But we have a way, I mean, right now we can, I always tell you that example. I went to that meditation lecture and the guy was the real deal. He was up there with robes and everything, and he said, you can walk out of this prison right now. You can walk out of this prison right now. But, you know, the interesting thing though is that, you know, just another aside. A lot of people say, well, I have to be in the present. But we have something more than that. We have prayer and meditation. We can meditate and be in the present, which is good. But faith is amazing. Then we have the grace and the faith. When we have faith that it's not us in some kind of higher consciousness, you know, people have all kinds of spirit of the universe, or they have a God, a deity of their understanding. This is where the amazing turn in their life comes. You know, this program really works. I told you an example, and I'm going to say it again. There was a lecture I was watching on the internet, and it was an atheist and a person who had faith, and they were having a debate. So a guy came up to the podium. It was question time, and the guy said, look, he said in comments from the audience, he says, look, in my life I've had this faith in a higher power, this God consciousness, right? He says, my life is turned around. I'm so happy, I'm so joyous, and I'm so free, and just life is good. So the guy who was arguing against the person who didn't believe in God, he said, there's no such thing as God or a higher power. He said we could do it by self-will, by science. He said to him, look, what more proof do you need? You see this guy here? Look at him. He's joyous and he's happy. So what more proof do you need? Well, I mean, he said, I think the debate is over now. This guy says it all. So that's what we see in our lives. And, you know, when they're saying this, that we have to show by example, and step 12 practice this in all our affairs. So our obligation when we do this is to help others, is to work these steps and have that spiritual awakening. You know, either in the problem or in the solution we have right in front of us. Step 1, 2, and 3 tells us, but if you don't want to believe step 3, made a decision to turn our will in our lives, then why even go on? Step 1 alone is the whole program. We're powerless. So in our lives, if we can't we can intellectualize this for years and years. And some places they don't even go to the steps. You walk in, you talk about the big book and the steps, and they're like looking at you like, okay. And they say, but next time, please, let's not talk about it. Or when I go to meetings, I'd express how happy I was from doing the steps, and after the meeting, people would say, "Look, there's a lot of upset, depressed people here. Don't you keep on pushing the steps, the spiritual stuff. They have to talk about their problems. If they don't share it, they wear it. If you talk about the problems, you cut it in half. No, I don't want to make my problems real. If I say to you, look, if I say to you, I'm upset with the neighbor, I'm upset with somebody in my family, I'm saying, know the truth from the false. I'm saying, hey, look, I should be upset. If a boss yells at me at work, hey, look, everybody, I had this problem, my boss yelled at me at work. No, that's the problem. The solution is that who the heck cares what other people say, think, or do? When we have this God consciousness and when we feel better about ourselves, I use that example, the elephant walking down the street and the dogs are barking, the elephant doesn't care. That's this confidence. We have less self-esteem, more higher power esteem. Get it? When we're in a self, we're weaklings. When it says here, Ebby came in the room, it said in here, he was a weakling of a man. Did you hear what I read? He said he came in here, he was destroyed. Like most all of us, I got to ask this. I mean, most of us come